One last thing I wanted to do on the painting. This is pretty much finished. I finished up the background and that sort of thing. I wanted to account for something that happens in painting from time to time, and in general in creating artwork. A lot of times you have light sources that are a different color than the actual thing that you're painting on that one. And then so you have little bits of this odd color showing up in the thing. Like, the bird is primarily a brown bird on that, some brown and whites, but all of a sudden you see little highlight areas that have a different color on them, and maybe some of the shadow areas have a different color on them as well. And that's because of the light source, and that illuminates things. And sometimes you may, like if you're outside and you see the sun, you have a yellow light source, and so you would expect that as that yellow comes down, that yellow light, and strikes the surface, it may get some white reflected back, because that's the lightest color. But there's also some yellow that you'll start to see on the surface. Example is when you're painting snow or something like that, it's not white, it's blue on that. It's usually a light blue on the snow. It's because it's out where the sun is and the sky is there. And so if you have like a blue sky, there's going to be a bluish tint to your snow a lot of times as well. Particularly in the shadow areas, you're going to see a lot of that blue. The rule is this, that if you have a warm light, like let's say you have yellow light coming in this way like this, then you're going to have a cool shadow on this other side. So what do I mean by cool? So if you have a yellow, you might have a blue or a purple coming in this way. If you have a green light, that's a cool light. If a green light's coming on in this way, on that, you're going to have a cool light, and then you're going to have warm shadows. And so then on the shadow side over here, that means you might have a warm color like a brownish or a dark red or something along those lines, to where in your shadow areas you see those sorts of things. Now, what I've done is I've mixed up some paints over here. This is yellow ochre, and then there's just white added to it. This is some of our blue, and I've just added a little bit of white to it as well. So I'm just going to come back in some selected area, and the painting's mostly done, but I'm just going to come in and I'm going to grab some blue here to start out with that. And I'm just going to come down here where the same value that we see, and then maybe in just a few spots in there we have a little bit of a blue shadow that we have in there. And it's not real dominant that you see. Oh, still got green on my hand here. And so I'm just going to, in some of these feathers, be able to pop a little bit of blue. Maybe a little bit of blue over in this area too on that. Like I said, you're not going to see a lot of it, but you're gonna feel it more than anything, and it's going to give another dimension to that. And so here's in the feather area, because this is a shadow area. I'm saying the light source is coming in from here, so I'm just putting a little bit of that blue into the shadow areas on that. Like I said, it may not be bold enough that where you actually see a lot of it, but it might be enough to where you have a feeling of it, and it's going to add a little bit more dimension to that monochromatic nature of things. We've just painted, it's a big brown bird, right? Well, most birds are not completely brown all over on those, and so there's some room for that. Here I'm going to go the next darkest blue on those, and so some of that maybe we come up in here, and where I have those sorts of blues happening in the shadows. And it's subtle. It's not real dominant on that. So I'm just hitting a little bit of my cool shadows. And then maybe over here, that one's a little bit more than what I wanted to see, but we're gonna stick with it. A little bit too blue on that one with those. So I'm going to beat that in a little bit. Now the brown here is mostly dried, and so harder to get those in there a little bit. And maybe we come over here a little bit too. Let's get a little bit of shadow in here, a little bit of blue. Dark blue on the dark brown. Just a little bit. Maybe just some touches over here. This is not this is not just a real bold application. This is subtle stuff that we're after there, and as such, we may not see a ton of it. Okay, I think I might hold off on this lightest blue over here on those. I'm just not seeing where I really want to have that happen. Maybe some of these other ones, as it's coming over here. Let me get this. Just some subtleties on that shadow area that we're trying to create. And if it's too much, we can always go back and beat it up a little bit with the browns. Trying to make it uniform so you kind of get a feel for that it's happening in quite a few spots, but you don't want it to be so overpowering that it's going to beat you over the head with it on those. We want it pretty subtle. Okay, so I put in a little bit of the shadow on that one. I'm actually going to switch brushes just for the sake of going here. Now I'm going to my yellow. So this is going to be on my highlight areas, my highlight sides, and so that's going to be on this side over here. And so I'm looking for maybe some of those darker areas here. We can just maybe touch a little bit of this yellow in on top of it, you know, instead of having the brown on it. Maybe even in here, because that's the highlight side, right? Coming in on that sort of a thing. Not too bad. Just a little bit. I'm being able to see that. Okay, maybe in here, right in the transition between those two values of brown. Okay, now come on, let's get that lightest yellow. Now here's the thing. It's not usually when things are reflect, they're not just the pure beach over the head type of things, right? Like this yellow light as it strikes here, there's white and there's white of the feathers, but we're just trying to add a little bit more flavor to some of those areas. And I'm just going to lightly scrape. This has a little bit of a texture to it. And so I'm just going to lightly scrape over some of that texture, let some of that yellow rub off on the texture. Let's get a little bit more here. I definitely needed just a little bit in here. Like I said, we're not really changing the value too much on it, but we are changing some of the other to it. And so I'm going to come in here with some of this stuff and just a hint of yellow on some of these warm side of these feathers. Remember, just scraping some of the paint off onto the textured surface. And so it gives it a little bit more, not quite as a flat surface. We start to see those feathers a little bit more as we have it rotating across, maybe. There's not a lot of it. Well, there's a big clump of yellow on here. hit it a little bit stronger in here, just because that's kind of where the light source is coming from this side. Remember, we're cooling this side, warming this side a little bit with our highlights. And maybe that's enough. Maybe a little more down here is what we're looking for. Just to kind of warm those feathers up and create a light source like that. Okay. Now ideally, here's something to think about too on those. If we do have a yellow light, let's say, probably your best bet actually on a darker value for your dark side is probably purple, because those are complementary colors. They'll intensify each other just a little bit. And so warm light, cool shadow, so you got a warm yellow and kind of a cool purple. That means that purple is going to have a little bit more blue in it than red on those. I decided to go with blue because that's kind of what I had available on this one. I think I want to, that's more or less it. You know, like I said, I don't think that it needs to be a dominant thing that we're looking for on these with our stuff, but it does need to be just enough to make that work for us. So if we have warm light, we have some cool shadows over here. I'm trying to cool this whole side down and shadow it up a little bit. That's why I'm hitting it a little bit stronger now with the blues on that one, so that we can see that there's a blue trend over here on each of these feathers, that this is the shadow side. This is also the warm side, or the highlight side of things. And so I'm dusting those in there. Maybe we do a little bit of this too. Remember when we're just kind of scraping some onto the ridges of the paint, right? I think I'm going to do that too, just with some of this side, some of these pieces. So it just catches a little bit of that blue on the ridges of the surfaces. And I'm sticking all to this side, all to the right side with the blue. How's that grab you? That was pretty cool, huh? Getting that little bit on there, I'm liking that. And so now we've changed it where it was looking like it was just like a serious brown bird, all the same thing. We've added a little bit of highlights here. I could go back if I wanted to try and unify things a little bit more. Maybe hitting some on the surfaces in through here and in the background, possibly. Maybe putting a little more blue into the trees on that. I don't know. I mainly was thinking about it on the bird. That's just a little bit too. That's still too wet. I can't come and hit those little tints of blue in there on that. I do want to get that was a lot of it, not a little bit more down in through here. And a little bit more down in here. Then I think I'm gonna call it good. There we go. I'm liking that a lot better. This one is almost too strong right there. I'm gonna beat it up a little bit so it's not quite as strong. Okay, maybe a little bit here.
Yeah, I'm going to
And that's about it.
I'm bored.